Liberty Elementary School Board will come to order today, Monday, August 19th, 2024, for our work session scheduled here at the Jerry Roby facility. We have 4 board members present, board members Bixler and Kenyon, Vice President Parks, myself, Michael Todd. Board member Strencioni is out sick today. Next item is the Pledge of Allegiance. Vice President Parks, can you lead us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item 1.3 is next. It's our spring 2024 AASA scores, letter grade formula, and the AASA math proficiency. Dr. Monroe.
President Todd, Vice President Parks, members of the board, Dr. Sloat is going to lead our work study session tonight, and President Todd just read kind of the 3 areas that we'll go over. First, Ed will go over our 2024 AASA scores in ELA and math. It kind of a broad brush. I know these have been provided to the board before, but we wanted to spend some time with the board on that. Then secondly, he'll talk about the letter grade formula. We don't have our letter grades quite yet. We don't have any cut scores determined that are completely finalized that we're 100% confident in, but just kind of the components of what make up the letter grade formula according to the Arizona Department of Education. And then lastly, we wanted to surface our AASA math proficiency from the math resolution at the last meeting. I believe it was Member Kenyon and Member Cirincione talked about what the board's direction was as far as, do you want to quantify what a significant increase in proficiency means in math? Do you want to leave that wording? We just wanted to surface that with the board to see what direction we feel the urgency that the board does in increasing our math proficiency, but we just wanted to give that some airtime in case there was more direction from the board if we stick with that wording or if there was a percentage or what have you. So these are the 3 things, and Dr. Sloat, I will turn it over to you.
President Todd, members of the governing board, thank you for letting me take a few minutes today to go through the topics, the ASA scores, the accountability framework, which I know we've heard before. It changes ever so slightly over the years. Useful to go through it one more time to familiarize ourselves with it. I'm going to look at the component scores that we have for 2024. We do not have any way to take those scores and sort of say what the letter grade is going to be, because the State Board of Education will not meet until October to ratify what those cut scores will be. And then following that, there'll be a public release from the State Board of Education in November of the school letter grades. And then finishing off with a open discussion of some proficiency goals. I have included in the packet the proficiency goals that all of the leadership team made in June of this year in our leadership team meeting, where we went through the proficiency numbers and did a goal setting process. And so we're going to look at those as well. So to start off with, the first slide on slide 3, this is the ELA proficiency. As you can see, three grade levels, 3, 4, and 6 went up. Grades 5 stayed exactly the same from 23 to 24. Grade 7 went down a bit from 44 to 42, and grade 8 stayed the same. So there's some variation there. 3 out of the grade levels went up. The district overall ELA proficiency rate went up from 38% to 40% between 23 and 24. The math proficiency on slide 4, we had 3 grade levels decline, 2 grade levels go up, and 1 grade level, grade 4, stay exactly the same. I find that the interesting part of this particular slide, if you look at either the dark blue, which is the 23 scores, or the beige bar, which are the 24 scores, that as you move from grade 3, 4, 5, and 6, you see a consistent multi-year decline as you move up through the grade levels. And that's the same both in 23 and in 24. And then we bump up in grade 7 and 8 a bit with that. But there is definitely a trend there that as we move up from grade 3, the math proficiency scores decline. That, well, if you compare that to the ELA scores on the previous slide, you don't see that kind of consistent trend. That seems to be related to the grade level of the students. The district overall math proficiency rate stayed the same at 26% between 23 and 24. As I'm going through this, especially into the A through F, if you have any questions or want to say anything, please.
Dr. Slow, real quickly, just as we look at these scores, I know that sometimes the expectation curriculum-wise is different from grade level to grade level. 7th grade, in my memory, has always been a little more challenging because the kids are doing more, they have less available time to do their work at school and so on. And the curriculum itself is more challenging. Has there been any kind of look into the I guess, challenge of the different grade levels? Or is one more challenging than the other?
Well, I think we would say that as you move up through the grade levels, especially in math, it gets complex, and that it builds upon the previous grade level, more so, I think, than in the ELA side. That's not to say it doesn't on the literacy side, but certainly in the math, as you move up from between grades 3, grade 4, 5, 6, 7, it's getting more complex and challenging, both in the type of mathematical concepts that have to be learned, as well as the context of the use of the mathematics.
Yeah, Doc, so that has been my experience. 7th grade just seems tough, like being a junior in high school, just tough. I noticed that a lot of the numbers are really close, whether they gain or lose. Are they significant statistically?
It's
that close of a range?
Great question. So I chose for these slides to do numerical direction, not statistical significance. And when I worked with the ASA scores and the proficiency scores in the workshops with the leadership teams here, it's because we're dealing with 400 or 500 students in each of these categories. I tend to say that plus or minus 2 to 3 points in this may not be statistically significant, and it may include simply random error that's going on. If there's a trend over time and it's going up by 2 and by 2 and by 2 or vice versa, then that's better evidence that there's something going on. So I've chosen here just to indicate whether it went up numerically or went down, but if it's a 1 point, then I would tend to say not much is happening here with it. If you go up by 2 points, it's still probably not that much happening, especially if it's just for 1 year. When you start to get to 3% on these sample sizes, and 4% definitely, and 5%, you know something is probably both statistically significant, but is actually happening. There's been some disruption or some change in the learning that's going on. So one has to take a very small change in these in 1 year cautiously.
Right, yeah, and I do like that approach. All you're looking at is what's the change, not whether or not statistically it's significant. One last question on this, and I don't know how the math is done. That's very complicated from what Ms. Camp showed us last year. I mean, it's very complicated formula. So does it matter that because we're small, one person's performance has a greater impact than in a larger district? Usually I see this happening where you have somebody who appears a couple of different places. Maybe they're under IEP services as well as language struggle. So they might appear in 3 different places, not only at grade level, but also in some of the sub-pops. Does that work into here? Could it make that big a difference?
Not in these numbers, because these at the district level include all students in grade 3 across the whole district. So that sample size is very large. We have nearly 4,500 students in the district. If I had broken these down, incidentally, as in the appendice of the handout, I've broken all of this data down by school, by grade level. So if you were to break that down by grade level and say performance level, minimally proficient, partially proficient at grade 3 in a school location, you can start to get into some very small sample sizes depending on the distribution. But at this level, if you're thinking about like an outlier or somebody that's at the very bottom, it's not going to pull these numbers apart very much. These are upper level numbers to indicate the population at that particular grade level in that particular subject. And here, a movement of 1 or 2% points either way probably doesn't show much effect going on or much systematic effect. But when you start to get to 3 to 4 to 5% changes year to year, I'd say that I'd feel more comfortable in interpreting that and saying something is happening here that was different. It's disruptive from the previous part. And I use that word disruption to mean something from an intervention has caused, or lack thereof, has caused a change in the learning level of the
And that
students.
change could be positive as well as negative.
It could be positive as well as negative, for sure. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But these are relatively large sample sizes at the district level. I've also included the science on slide number 5, showing both grade 5 and grade 8 science going up, and the overall district went up by 1% point from 27 to 28. Again, it's numerical, not a lot of change between the 2 years. Slides number 6 and 7 are going to break down ELA and math by school. And so this is all grades, all students within the school on their proficiency on the assessment. So for slide 6, it's the ELA percent proficient by school, and we see went up for Blue Horizon, Freedom, and Liberty, and West Star, and the proficiency rates went down in Estrella Mountain, Las Brisas, and Rainbow Valley. And in slide 7, it's the math proficiency. And we have numerical declines in Blue Horizon, Las Brisas, and Rainbow. Estrella Mountain is about the same. Freedom goes up from 11 to 12%, and Liberty went up from 23 to 24%. So you can see that the changes, even the numerical changes, they're not on a large scale basis, big jumps across the school sites for math. So I'm going to stop here just for some comments, because that's a summary of sort of the highest level of the proficiency rates. In your packet, again, this is all broken down by individual grade level with individual schools. I think the most interesting thing that I saw in all of this data at this level was the overall district scores in math, and that decline going from grade 3 to grade 4, 5, and 6 just continue to decline. And it happens in both years that I'm referencing. So it's not a one-off trend going on. So that raises a whole series of questions about why that would be happening. Who are the students in grade 4 and where were they in grade 3? And then students in grade 5, where were they 2 years ago, 3 years? And is there this cascading effect going on as students move into the grade 6, 5, 6, 7? Are they bringing with them the deficiencies from earlier on? But it does appear in Liberty that those scores do decline quite a bit, actually, from grade 3 to grade 6. Grade 3 is nearly 40%, and at grade 6, we're at 17, 18%. So worthy of a lot of questions in digging into that data. Any discussion, any questions on that? All right, so moving into the accountability formula for 2024, and you've seen this before. Ms. Camp has presented a number of times on this. We'll go through it, and please ask any questions if you have. I am going to spend some time on a couple of the calculations, and we have one new set of metrics this year that we have not had in the last 4 years that are going to be very useful to us as staff in identifying at-risk students and what their trajectories are in the future. That's the student growth targets that I've included in this. The overall formula is out of 100 points. Growth is the largest single component in the accountability framework at 50% of the points. Proficiency is the second highest at 30. We have things for acceleration and ELL students and improving their proficiency at 10% each, making up a total of 100 points in the formula. The 2022-23 cut marks are at the bottom of that slide, on slide 9. Those may change in October, depending on what the governing board decides with this. Now, I've been doing this for quite a long years and was heavily involved in the early development of the accountability formula back in 2010, 11, 12 on the technical advisory committees and things. And we're looking now at these relative sort of weights, if you will, or the how much emphasis is being given to these. And proficiency and growth back in 2013, 14, 15 were equally weighted on both sides. The growth measures were broken into a different set of categories, but they were still growth measures. And proficiency, which was 50%, and the growth measures were 50%. And after 2015, 2016, a big discussion was occurring at that time. And that discussion was, what is the effect of poverty on the A through F awards in the growth model? And there was a lot of discussion that went on to that. Should these things be equally weighted? And what was happening was you would get schools that would be very low poverty schools that had extremely high proficiency rates and not high growth rates. I mean, growth is the instructional impact. And they were getting very high, they were getting A's and B's. And you had schools that were very high poverty schools that had reasonable growth, but the proficiencies were so low. And in that weighting of 50-50, they were consistently being down in the F, the D, and the C range. And the teams at that time changed the formula. So when we got into 2017, 2018, 2019, we see the weightings going on here as currently today, where growth is receiving the majority of the weight. Proficiency, obviously not small a weight, but at 30%. And then the other two components at 20%. And that change was actually a policy change through the State Board of Education and the ADE and the technical advisory committees on the discussion of what's the proper weight to place on these components. And the decision at that time was to weight growth most heavily and proficiency at 30%. So there is a history here with why those weights are the way they are. For better, for worse, but there is a background to it. And it has not always been weighted like this. The proficiency points, you can get a total of 30 points for it, and we get it 2 different ways. The straight proficiency of the students that take the test in the year. Students take the test and they get put into highly proficient, proficient, partially proficient, or minimally proficient. As you can see, if you're minimally proficient, you have 0 points towards proficiency. So schools and school districts that have a large proportion of students in the minimally proficient lose a lot of points. And there's an incentive to then take those students that are in the minimally proficient area, identify them, and move them out of minimally proficient if one wants to increase their letter grade or increase their standing on the accountability model. Partially proficient gets 0.6 of a point every student. If you're a proficient student, you get a weight of 1, and then highly proficient, a weight of 1.3. So pretty straightforward how you calculate the points in that, but there's a secondary way to calculate proficiency, and that is stability points. Stability is all about how long students have been in the school consecutively. And the assumption here, the theory of action is, if you will, is that a student that's been consecutively enrolled with us at a school site for a longer period of time should reasonably have a higher probability of being proficient and higher proficiency than a student that is unstable and comes in from another district or is moved in and is only here for a shorter period of time. Essentially saying the longer we have a student with us, the better that student should do. And that's the thinking of what stability points is here. And so there's 3 categories. You can be a new student, is where you're first year, you're a Phase 1 student in the school. You can be a student that has been in that school for 2 consecutive years, and you can be a student that's been in that school for 3 consecutive years. And you get a much higher weight assigned to the proficiency of students that have been in a school for 3 years under this formula. Because of the underlying theory that says if you've had this child for a longer period of time, then you probably should have identified their deficiencies, intervened, and then eliminated those deficiencies. So you get a much higher weight. Now, how we get the points, it's the higher of the 2 methodologies. For the school, we calculate it for straight proficiency, then we calculate it for under the stability model, and whichever one of those gives the higher of the points, that's the points that is used, assigned to the school and used in the accountability system. Isn't that interesting? It's interesting about the philosophies behind how the formula is either weighted or constructed. And, right.
Showing growth over time.
So I have a quick question. Does it work in reverse too? Meaning,
Do we have, if it only works
so,
one way?
well, the question. So you have a kid that's been there 3 years, and we're seeing the opposite problem, where your proficiency goes down.
Yeah, I understand exactly what you're saying. Yes, because if students in that category, they've been there for 3 years, if the proficiency of those students in that category is very low, you get sort of, I don't know how to say, you don't get the weight, you don't get the points because you have students that have been with you, but they're not proficient. So and it's weighted 30%. So you give up that weight in there and it's the intent is there to say, if you have students with you for a longer period of time, the expectation is that you're going to have a much higher level of proficiency. And so it's weighted by 15%. So I think the answer to that question is yes. It does. Of course, I'm the geek that likes to know why things are organized the way they were, and we had great fun, great discussions in designing the early algorithms here for the accountability formula. It's changed since I've been doing it. So the next part is student growth and its growth points. This is the largest component of this. So student growth percentiles are hard to understand for those that don't dive into them. Student growth percentile is really the percentile rank of a student's current year score compared to all other students in the state that entered into the grade level with that exact prior year score. So you take all the students in the state who scored, say, minimally proficient and had a low scale score, a low score on the test, percent correct. You want to think of it that way. And you put all those students into a group or treat them as if they're in a group. And then they go through the year, those students, and they take the test again, and they get scores on the test on the other end. Now, for those students in that particular group that started the year at the same place, The question becomes, who had the highest score at the end of the year? Who had the middle score? Who had the lowest score? And everything in between. So the student at the highest, that started at the same place and had the highest score at the end of the year, they're going to get the 99th percentile, just by the way percentiles are constructed. They're the highest score. Percentiles go from 1 to 99. So the person at the top is going to get the 99th percentile, and the person that scored the lowest from that same group gets the 1 percentile. Now repeat that for nearly every single prior year score, group kids in the whole state that started off with that score, and then the score above that, and then the score. So you have these groups all the way up and down the score scale, and they all fan out from their cohort, and all of them in those groups. The highest one gets 99, the lowest one gets 1, and then in between. So what's the interpretation of that, and why do we as educators think that that's really important? The number one reason why student growth percentiles were created originally by Dr. Bettenbrenner in Colorado, was the first state that really started to use growth models in their thing, is because the correlation between wealth or poverty and simple proficiency is incredibly high. It's incredibly high. I did the calculation here, and it was 0.9 between the percent proficient and poverty. So when you're asking what's the instructional effect of a teacher on a student throughout the course of the year, there's all these non-school factors that affect the way the student will get the score at the end of the year. That's just a straight score. And it makes it very hard to say that this teacher or this school or this grade level had this impact on the student. Student growth percentiles group everybody with the same score, whether that score is high or low, at the beginning of the year. So all of these effects are impacting that score, where that student score was. And the only thing that's impacting the growth of that student is no longer all these other outside factors, because it's all encapsulated in that cohort group. It's the instructional effect. It's the fact that they were in that classroom or that school for that year, and the instruction. It's the best statisticians can do to answer the question mathematically, what's the instructional effect on the student, regardless of where the student started the year at. Does that make sense? And that's why it's so important for us in the real world setting, is to say, what was the instructional impact on this student, this student, this student? And the instructional impact can be high on a low performing incoming student, and the instructional impact on a high performing student can be equally as high. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, it makes sense. But if I'm looking at what this is and what you're saying, then there really isn't like an algorithm that will predict growth. So the state of Arizona is not saying we predict that a fourth grader will grow X amount through an algorithm. What we do is we start with the lowest score, the highest score, and then break percentages up from there. So that score could change from year to year.
Right. If I created a statistical model to forecast what the outcome is going to be on student test scores,
Right.
If I just tried to forecast, if I wanted to predict the student's test score, how many he or she gets correct on the test at the end of the year, for the last 50 years, there's been statistical models that have high prediction of the test score, because the test score is just that one point in time. But we had no models that basically said, hey, let's take out all of these other conflating factors that impact a student's engagement in school, how well the student learns, and let's try to isolate just the instructional effect. That's what student growth percentile does. So the it reduces these external factors from in the 70s, 80s, 90s down to the 10s, 20s. So correlations, if you will. And that's why it's important. It's not the be all and end all, because there's some serious limitations to the growth measure. And we've had some discussion about it. So the fact that it's a standardized measure and it isolates the instructional effect is really important to us, because we want to know not only is our instruction impacting high performing students, but students that have severe deficiency, compounded annual deficiencies year after year after year. We want to help those kids as well. And we want to know if we're moving that child from compounded deficiency into less deficiency. It may not occur in 1 year, but we need to have a growth measure. And that's what this tries to do. What the student growth percentile does not do, its limitation is if I'm a student and I'm minimally proficient when I entered 5th grade, and I get a student growth percentile that's, say, 70th percentile. Okay, that's pretty good compared to everybody else that entered with the same deficiency level as me. But I still didn't pass. I still didn't reach proficiency. But I grew. Well, the question becomes, well, how long is it going to take for that student to have the deficiencies eliminated such that they pass the test or they're proficient? How long? Was that growth for that 1 year sufficient to put me on a trajectory that would get me in 2 years to proficient, or 1 year or 3 years? It doesn't answer that question. So in statistics, we call this an insufficient measure. It's necessary. I need to know what the impact of instruction is, but it's insufficient to answer the question, how long, given what instruction has helped that child, how long will it take for that child to be proficient? The essential question. Some grow even at high rates, but it may take 2 or 3 years. Enter the next slide, which is student growth targets, which in 22, 23, and 24, we did not have student growth targets in our accountability model for one reason, and that's because of the interruption from the COVID pandemic and its impact on schools. So we had our schools closed. We had a year that the state test was given in a insecure, non-traditional environment, which rendered those scores invalid. So we had this 2-year break, and we can't calculate student growth targets with that break. So it took 3 years, 22, 23, and 24, for us to have the statistical information in order to generate student growth targets. So what are student growth targets? I'm sorry, it's the slide 14 on the slide up here. And if you would allow me, I think I'd like to get up and point, if that would be okay. So we have 3 students, and from the prior year to the current year, there was instruction, and these students had growth. This student right here, student A, had the highest growth among these students. Student B had a bit less growth to this current year, and student C had the lowest growth. So the question becomes, if I don't know anything else beside that, how long will it take these students to reach the proficiency line, given that, especially in math, things are getting harder every single year? So a student growth target tells me the growth that this student needed in order to reach proficiency within a set time period. And in the Arizona's model, that set time period is 3 years in the K-8 model. For better or for worse, that's the way it's computed. You have to pick a time period to generate the student growth targets. So you can see this student right here had growth, but if that growth were to continue, the student would never reach this line, which is proficiency. Student D, and please forgive my lack of graphic ability, the slopes. You can see that's a much higher growth rate, but it's still not reaching proficiency in the current year. That student's still not going to reach proficiency in the future year one, and it's going to take 2 years or 3 years to get to that. So this student growth percentile is not, even if it's high, it's not sufficient. So what we need is we need two things. We need the student growth percentile for this year for all our students. And then I need the student growth target. And I need to compare those two to answer the question, even though you want to say we had growth, was the growth sufficient enough to eliminate the deficiency in a reasonable amount of time such that the student will reach proficiency? And if it's not, we shouldn't be taking credit for it. We shouldn't be saying this is great stuff unless we have confidence that the student growth percentile, this trajectory, is going to reach our goal within a reasonable amount of time. Whether 3 years is a reasonable amount of time, it's open to debate, right? But we now, for this year, I'm going to be reporting to everybody, every single student, whether they made growth from the previous year as a result of instruction, and was that result impact of instruction for that student sufficient to ensure that they will reach proficiency within that 3 years. I can't change the 3 year because it's part of the calculation, but it's still a useful indicator. And I think there is we've had some discussion that says, well, growth, you know, if you say you're having growth and the proficiency never changes, then what good is the growth? Completely, totally agree. If you have growth, the growth has to be high enough such that it makes a change. It disrupts the pattern for the student, eliminates the deficiency, and gets them over the line in a reasonable period of time. Isn't that cool?
I like your data chart. Let me catch up here a little bit.
Absolutely.
So if you're starting at the beginning, and I see that the proficiency increases over the years, what happens, and this is the deal, it's like, if we push a kid through, a kid goes through to the next year, the curriculum's going to change and move forward. What are we doing for the kids that haven't met the proficiency for that year? Because aren't we continue to accelerate? Why they're behind? Are they ever really going to reach where they need to be? Are we just always trailing year over year over year over year? Our ultimate goal is to get them proficient enough for 8th grade to go into 9th grade. If we never meet that, we have a problem. So it'll be interesting to see when we start digging down in the weeds on some of this data numbers to see exactly where we're at. Because if what I think we're going to see, if we see, you know, more than half of the kids under those lines and not ever going to make that within the 3-year period, especially with the accelerated program as you go through years, we got a problem.
And you know, the response that I give from my hat in the organization is the data geeks response. I now have data to actually, I have measures on every student 4 through 8, that gives us an indication to say, yes, while the student made growth may be at the 30th percentile, but the student was starting off in minimally proficient at the bottom end. And is that growth sufficient to make any difference to the student's life? And how long will it take? And we can do that student by student by student by student. And they're sitting in our classrooms right now. So the report that says, this student is minimally proficient in your classroom right now and has such low growth that as they moved into the more challenging curriculum in grade 6 than grade 7, they're never going to get out at that growth rate. So what do we have to do? What we have to do is use that data to identify those profoundly at-risk students and then do some intervention to change that outcome. Now, what that intervention is I'm going to leave it to my colleagues to say, but from a data standpoint, from an information standpoint, these are some of the best metrics that we can have that are available to us at this level from these models. We haven't had that. We haven't been able to say student growth is, hey, student growth, median student growth in grade 3 in my school is like 47, at the 47th percentile. Isn't that great? It went up from 36 the year before. Not necessarily, right? Because if that growth trajectory never gets those groups of students out of being deficient as the curriculum gets more difficult and more difficult and more difficult, we're going to be sending them to high school, right, deficient, because they're never going to catch up. So if they're minimally proficient, we call them the double zero students. If they're minimally proficient and they have low growth, then those students are definitely this student C here. They're just not going to reach proficiency in a time frame that's reasonable. So if you have a student that comes in and that's the SGP at this point in time, that SGP for this next year has to have a trajectory that's going this way. And that's where the disruption in the instruction occurs. And if it doesn't, then that student just gets farther and farther behind. I've called it chronic compounded deficiency, year after year after year after year. I won't do the letters.
By the way, thank you for all this,
Does that make
because yeah, well, it's an interesting thing because I think our phonics program came in 3 years ago. Three or four? Three. So, and we've put the interventionists in there. We're watching fantastic growth out of, because we kind of had some data we were looking at, the rest, and we decided where we needed to fill those holes, so to speak. Now it's math time, right? So we're looking at the math stuff. So this gives us a really good head start on where we go from here. And that's why it's really imperative for the board and why we took the direction we did, because this is critical. You know, I look at this, the next questions, obviously, you know, leave it to the specialists in the area, but how do we attack this? How do we get down into it? Because, you know, you're going to have kids at all different levels of proficiency that really all need help to get them to that next level. So anyway, thank you for that. It was very helpful.
My last comment, I've always focused on the minimum. We focus on the minimally proficient, the most at risk, but you can be a proficient student in 3rd grade in math or reading and have a growth trajectory that in 2 years puts you down into the partially proficient. So you can be on a track. It's not just up. And it's fine. There's 2 more components that make up 20%, 10 points each. One is on our ELL students and their proficiency and proficiency growth, as well as straight proficiency on the AZELA. So there's 2 components there. And then there's a whole section of the acceleration and readiness that has growth measures, well, proficiency, focus on proficiency measures in grade 8 mathematics, grade 3 ELA. So the 2 ends of that, having to increase our proficiency in mathematics in the high end before they move into high school. And then the K3 type focus on ELA in the younger grades, chronic absenteeism, the subgroup improvement sections or race, ethnicity, various program memberships. If you're at all interested, it is in the link I sent you, an 88-page technical document, how to calculate all this stuff. So feel free to do it. It's riveting reading. Somebody's got to read it, so I did with it. Yeah, right. But it's there. I've given it to you guys. And then special ed inclusion for that, of having students in the regular ed classroom on that. And the details on that are, for all of these, are usually comparing what our rates are compared to the state in some way. And
Yeah,
are we
it's-
above the state or?
And Dr. Sloat, it is this group that I'm talking about with the subgroups. So a student that would say would appear in the special education inclusion, they're also going to appear just like any other student. So they actually affect us twice.
That's a true statement. It's a true statement with the caveat that the weight associated with these is very low compared to the proficiency and compared to the growth weight for that student. So if you could have you could get some points, have marginal growth in some of these sub areas, get a point or two, but then if they're still in the minimally proficient category in the proficient area, you're going to lose a lot of points. Okay. There's some bonus points for special ed and science. Science is included in that that we can add on that are sort of, as they say, bonus points to the form. So any final comments about that? Yeah. So what I put in your packet is the 2022-23, the AF components scores. So you can see the data for 22-23, and then you can see the data on the next slide for 23-24. I didn't do it for you, but one could actually compare each of those cells, what the points are, and say what's the change. I'm sorry, actually I did do that. You can compare the proportion of the total points that those points are for a particular school. Like if proficiency is 30 points and Blue Horizon got 12 points, one could do the calculation and say what proportion of points is Blue Horizon getting for proficiency, getting for growth, and so on. What I chose to do is compare the 23 and 24 and then do the change in points for each of our schools. And it's a pretty direct or obvious where our points are coming from. So the green here is Blue Horizons is getting not too many additional points for proficiency, but getting 9.4 points for growth. If I did this table for the previous year to 2022, these numbers are all in the 0, 1, 2 range. When I did it for this year, and I saw numbers like 9.4 in growth, Freedom just taking growth and going beyond everybody at 13.6. They're getting an additional 13.6 points, even though their proficiency points didn't move very much. They had the highest level of growth, those SGP points, in the whole district. West Star, Liberty, Blue Horizon, and Freedom. That really stood out. When you add those points, the addition of these points in to the calculation on the cut marks, what's happening in all of those schools is their movement up that performance scale is going to be quite large. And it's going to impact, we think, what their letter grade might be, but we can't tell you, we can't go down that road because the state board may change the cut marks a bit. And a change in the cut marks by two or 3 points can change a letter grade for sure on that. But the story here between 23 to 24 is growth. And growth, like I said before, is the most direct measure we have of instructional effect after we take out all of the other non-school indicators on it. So it's a bright spot in that set of information. Discussion, questions on it? Yes.
Dr. Sloat, just kind of looking at what we just went over, going back to the beginning and seeing that trend, in proficiency heading down over those 4 years. It's very evident, especially when you were just showing, explaining this, how this works with the fanning out and just seeing what over time, what their student growth target's going to be. Very obvious we need to get our kids as high as possible in the lower grades and get them started already in those proficient. So that's very, very important. And I think this board's done a good job at focusing on, you know, K through 3, but also going into grade 4, grade 5. And, but I just wanted to make that comment just because, you know, looking at these, you can tell there's a, obviously this is just how they do it. We don't have the data in front of us of each child and each, but just kind of looking at where the trend has been with proficiency going down, that's obviously a big red flag year over year. And I get it that things are going to be more intense. The curriculum's more intense as they progress to the next grade level, but getting that foundational piece in their education as soon as possible, it just shows how important that is as their years continue.
Yes, absolutely. It is just not the case that one can argue we are continuing to grow and grow and grow, and the proficiency points, the proficiency levels don't move or go in the opposite direction, because they can't. You can't have that. Mathematically, you can't have that. It's all based on the same test. You have to have sufficient growth for those most that need students. Well, maybe I should say all students. You have to have continual sufficient growth. And in our case, the emphasis to move proficiency higher requires high level of growth. And that translates into high levels of instructional effectiveness, because that's what growth is by the way it's computed. By the way we've designed, as measurement experts, designed the growth measure, it is designed to isolate the impact that instructional year has had. Now, it's not an individual teacher because it's a campus environment, but it's what have we done to grow that student who is below proficiency? Have we disrupted that pattern and put that student on a trajectory so that they will grow? So it is a true statement, President Todd. You can't claim we have growth, and have declining proficiency. But I'll point out, I don't have the slides here, that when I look back a year to the 2022-23, those growth points in measures here were like 0, minus 0.1, plus 1, plus 2. And this year we've got plus 13, 9, 7. That's evidence of instructional impact in growth. That has to stay. We have to do it again. We have to do it again. We have to do it again. And then proficiency will start to go up. Whether 3 years or 4 years is enough, is sufficient, from a policy standpoint of, is it quick enough? Different story. How much can you expect to grow in 1 year in the proficiency? Tough question to answer in the short run, but it is a true statement that you must have, if you have low proficiency in the beginning of this process, you must have high growth. You must have strong instructional effectiveness to get us out of the hole.
So Dr. Sloat, let's go to the last section. That's a very good transition. So go to the next slide, Ed. So Dr. Sloat's going to explain this slide to you, but the one thing that I wanted to discuss with the board is what came up at the last meeting. We've had open up illustrative mathematics for 1 year. Our staff was just trained on it. We see the results. It's fairly new. It would be great if we could change these things around in a snap of a finger, but good reform takes time. It's mission critical. It's all hands on deck. And so what I'd like to just discuss with the board, and Ed, I'll let you talk about this slide, is what is significant growth in proficiency, or what is a significant increase? And I know Vice President Parks talked about 20%, and there was a little discussion from the board, and then it sort of got tabled. But we just wanted to have that discussion with you guys, because we want you to know that this is mission critical for us as it is for you. If I had the silver dollar, if I had the magic wand in my pocket, I would pull it out and wave this all away. but compounding things take time and consistency, and we have to turn the ship around, right? We have to turn the ship around. And so let's talk about that. But Ed, why don't you tell them kind of what this slide represents as part of what we can
So it's
discuss.
in June, Ms. Campen led everyone in the leadership team meeting. My part in that meeting was presenting through the DAP the analysis of the test scores that came out. And part of that process was a goal-setting process, an initial goal-setting process in which each of the sites looked at their data, went deep into looking at their proficiency rates and everything, and established goals for their campus in both ELA and math. And I'm probably not the one to discuss this or talk about it too deeply, but coming up with how much, from where we ended up in 2024, the question is, what is a reasonable expectation, an achievable goal that we can increase that proficiency by the end of this coming year? These on this slide are the adopted.
These were decisions made by the campus
Campus
leadership
leaders.
teams during the Leadership Academy. And you can see in the yellow, like in math, the numbers vary. There's variance across campuses. There's kind of a district number. And I mean, if you were to take an average of those, it would be, plus 15 or so percentage points. But just wanted to surface that with the board. The language in the resolution, which I know the board is aware of, is significant growth in proficiency with state standardized test scores. And we will do what the board directs. And so if the board wants to put a number on that, if the board wants to have a school by school analysis of that, we can certainly do that. This is our second year with this curriculum. It's been my experience that there's no perfect curriculum. It's been my experience that curriculum is only as good as the fidelity that you show to it. And that involves training, that invites oversight, that invites accountability. So we will take the direction from the board, but I just wanted to bring that back since it came at the last board meeting, some of the thoughts from the board, so that we can have some really good targets as our principals are working with their staff on goals and things right now. Maybe they need to adjust these goals, our principals, So what are some of the board's thoughts?
There's a reason I left it open. And one of the reasons I left it open is this is one piece of a puzzle. We're missing some key pieces in the program. So this has to do with not only looking at growth, but what are we doing to the point of looking at, what is the avenue we're taking as a district to work with the kids who are struggling, who are not meeting? What other supplemental instruction pieces can we bring in? There's a lot of pieces here that have to come together, and this is part of the conversation that we're going to have with the board and with the staff as we move on throughout the year, as to, by the time we get to the end of the year, is what's in play and what are we doing? Are we going to move forward, or is this just not going to work? So I don't really want to put a number on it. These are great to look at, and I'm okay with looking at these. If this is where you're going to meet, that's fine. It's one piece. So we want to see a much bigger, we go at this with much more of a broad approach. I personally, I question we're handling the fundamentals correctly. Can we do that with some supplemental materials in early grades? So I prefer not to put anything in as far as, we have, if you meet these goals, great. No, I think this is a part of the one piece of the puzzle. So.
Well, for me, thank you, Dr. Slope, for this information, because the numbers that we received at the last meeting were not all the camps. Some of the camps are great, but some definitely were lower than what I would like to see. But digging through it into this level, actually, I found it a much more positive experience. It looks to me like we're trending the right direction, by and large. Yeah, there are some kids, but it's a small number, and with the information that we can develop, we can really target those kids. It's not like we need a whole big change. We just need to really address some of the kids, and it's a small number. So I actually found this to be pretty positive. For me, if the leadership team was comfortable with these numbers, I'm comfortable with these numbers. I think some are pretty bold. To get the proficiency ratings up by what they're suggesting is going to take a lot of effort. So if they think they can do it, I support that. Let's do it.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Sloat, for this presentation. This brings a lot of clarity to how grade letters and just kind of how everything comes together. I'm glad that the leadership team has sat down and went over, and I like the numbers, but I'm actually with Vice President Parks where I don't want to set a number a part of it. As he stated, and I agree, there's so many things that can go on, and hopefully these goals that have been set by the sites, they take off and continue pushing towards these goals, right? And hopefully at the end of the year, we see them far bypass what's here. But at this point, I don't want to put a number on it, because I do think that there's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of pieces to the puzzle. And I disagree, Board Member Bixler. I think there's a lot of kids that need help, not just a few. Looking at our numbers, there's a lot of kids in our district that need some pretty intense intervention. I'm not okay with the low proficiency rates that we have across the district. And I understand the growth metric, proficiency metric, but that proficiency at the end of the day is what they need when they leave us. They need to be proficient. So getting pretty bold in what we do, and as Dr. Sloat said, if we have to intervene pretty critically to get that trajectory to change and bounce and go up, I think we just kind of need to keep that open and look at what we're doing. And that's kind of where I am right now. I'm for leaving it open-ended at this point.
I would also agree. Leaving it open-ended is a better way to go. But as we look at these goals, I guess I have a question. To set these goals that were done by the district, have we, as a district, Dr. Slow, we talked about this before a little bit. I think I understand your question, or your answer, but I want to make sure. Do you feel that we've done an adequate implementation study of this curriculum to ensure that we're doing this with the fidelity that needs to be? Because as I understand you, several times you talked about fidelity, and we've got to have that 100%. Otherwise, we're kind of fooling ourselves. So have we dug deep and done that, the implementation study to make sure that this is being introduced and carried on correctly? I guess that would be the proper terminology.
I'm going to answer it from my professional perspective on it. If you say, has there been a fidelity study on the implementation of curriculum? To me, that is a very specific piece of research that is structured. It's well defined how one does that. It's been done many times throughout, in public schools and in any schools. It's a fidelity of the implementation of the curriculum done as a research question and a research study. Collect data on it, do metrics throughout the grade levels, throughout the subject areas. How has it been implemented, and has it been implemented in a way that meets the existing sort of standards, sufficiency standards? I don't think that we have done something as research oriented as that, but in my understanding, especially for the new curriculum we've adopted, it went through, I think, a year and a half worth of reviews by experts, by our people, our staff. It wasn't done overnight. So I think I'm going to let you speak to it, but from my standpoint, you're asking me, have we done a formal fidelity study? I'm not aware of it that we have. Are those things good to do? Yes, they are. They're very good to do. And in fact, we have a action research study that right now happening at Rainbow Valley this year, I think, that asks that question. What's the alignment between the curriculum materials with the instructional materials, with the assessments that we're using to judge for progress throughout the year? And all those things, the curriculum, the instruction, the assessments that we're using, are they aligned? Aligned being not just a passive word, but align having definition to it. So I think that's the best I can answer that question. I'm not aware that we've done a formal, full.
So if we haven't
We have
done,
not. Our first year of implementation was this past year. So that's the very first year that we have implemented. We use the research from Ed Reports with the adoption of the implementation, which has research behind it at strong levels for all of their categories of research.
so I guess my concerns are have committee that comes to us, says this is the curriculum to buy. We take their word on it. We buy that. But then we don't know if we're implementing it properly. So we wait a couple years to figure that out. We may find out we didn't implement it properly. So again, I go back to this experimentation. We've got to stop experimenting in the classroom unless it's a science lab and it's a science experiment. But I just feel like too many times public education, especially with all this new math, these curriculum companies are mostly producing all of their own data. Kind of like big pharma, now big curriculum, big EDU. And every 5 years they want to tell you, whoa, go in a different direction. It seems like this is a game we have where we're continuing to change direction a little bit because they got to keep selling books. And I just know that my girlfriend's kids go to a charter school, and I looked at their math book and it's copyright 1992. And they have some of the very best, that's the last revision. They have some of the very best math scores in the state. But they haven't experimented. They found something that works and they're sticking to it. And not saying what they're doing, their curriculum is the best. Not saying it's the worst. I'm not saying anything about it. But what I'm saying is they seem to have taken the experimentation out. It seems like if you go back and just search minutes of the Liberty Elementary School District for the last 15 or 20 years, every time you turn around, there's another great medicine that's out there. There's another great, oh, take this. This is going to help you. Take this. By the time we spend 3 to 5 years, and it may be longer than that because it takes us 2 years to get the implementation done, study done, and we find out we've done it wrong, we've pushed a child all the way through 8th grade and said, this isn't working. So we have to change our thought process of this and not do wholesale changes all the way across the board that just keeps swaying back and forth. I just feel like we're a bucket of water. The water's just sloshing, and we got to put some baffles in it and some stability to make that water keep baffling around, keep washing everywhere. And for that, again, I just feel like setting a defined number doesn't fit the needs exactly of what we're trying to do because there are issues with growth. There are issues with there's the growth component, there's the proficiency component. Down the road, I think as I understand you and you truly, I believe, are an expert in this, continuous high growth will lead us to good proficiency. But the second that growth falters, we can drop our proficiency rating starts dropping, and we've seen that. So again, there's a lot of variables, and I hate to lock anybody into a number or a percentage because I don't think we can analyze it completely yet. And so we need to say we're concerned, which is where we're at. I would definitely agree with Board Member Kenyon that there's a lot of students. This isn't just a few. This is a lot of students that are struggling. And then we need to continue to watch this at least quarterly and leading up to a year to figure out where it is. I know we've tasked our staff with having some meetings. They had one. I think there's another one in a couple weeks. I'd like to see that progress a lot faster and broaden far greater into a lot more feedback, smaller group feedback. But again, I just don't think we can put a number specifically on this. I think we were on the right path at the last meeting of preventing a number from being declared. Well, we got to look at it. If we miss it by 0.5%, I don't think, if we put a number, we've got a problem at the end. If we leave this a little open-ended, it gives us the opportunity to continue to explore and take feedback from our staff, our teachers, our parents, and hear that. But again, I think that's our best path.
Thank you. Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Dr. Sloat.
Thank you. I do have a couple more questions though. Are we, and you may have covered it, and I apologize if I missed it. This was definitely an eye chart. I'm glad it's in really big font up there. I appreciate that. Are we tracking our individual students who stayed long-term? Can we look back and say, little Johnny started in kindergarten. He's now in 6th grade. This is exactly what he's done all the way through. Because again, we do have a time where we got a lot of growth happening, and I'm talking population growth, some transient growth happening. We really can't be responsible for an 8th grade class that gets 25 new kids in it, which is probably quite possible right now. That's all underperforming. That can start skewing our numbers. But what we are responsible for the students that have been with us long term, I know you talked about that a little bit over the 3-year time, but how much are we tracking that? Can we go back and basically eventually I'd like to get to a point where we can say students who are with us, students who have been with us since kindergarten have a X% proficiency rate in math when they promote out of 8th grade. If you've been with us since 2nd grade, your proficiency is, and it's going to skew a little bit more because we have no control, but the big ones are those ones that start with us in kindergarten and stay all the way through. That's going to be our biggest test of what we're doing.
So this afternoon on my screen, on my laptop, from 2017 to 2024, I had, it's not in the DAP yet, guys. I had every single student in the district over that 6-year period and could look at from 24 going backwards whether the student was minimally proficient, partially proficient, passed or failed the test, meaning proficient or not proficient, and looking back. So the answer, and I think it was your question on longitudinal growth that started it, was look at the 2024 outcomes and say how much of those outcomes are due to students that have been consecutively enrolled going back in time. So that, and I think I reported.
Right. I know we talked about that previously, so I was just curious if we're there.
So with that project, I went back and I grabbed the state's accountability file all the way back to 2017, I think. And it's every single student in the district enrolled in that district and their test score on the state test. So the answer to the question is yes, we actually have the data file in place right now, and I will be posting it for all of our colleagues so that we can look at that and answer that question. So the student that's sitting in an 8th grade classroom at 3rd period right now, not only what's the profile of that student on last year's assessments, Illuminate, and so they came into 8th grade on it because that's in the DAP right now, but be able to look at that 8th grade students, 7th grade, 6th grade, 5th grade, if they were enrolled and they're with us, right, and see this idea, because I was originally looking for chronic compounded deficiency that just is perpetuated year after year after year. Because if you're not proficient and you move to the more advanced grade level, you go into that grade level with some deficiency in learning by definition. And then if it then becomes you're not proficient and not proficient and not proficient, that's compounding that. So the answer to your question is yes, I have the data file. I think I have the data file that will help investigate that question. And in the weeks ahead, 10 days ahead, I'll be actually trying to profile that and put a visualizations together where one can interrogate that database, if you will.
Couple more questions. We use some testing programs throughout the year. And I'm sorry, I always get them mixed up. We've got Azella, I think Dreambox, one's English, one's more reading, one's math. And there's another one. But are those accurately telling us how the kids are going to do in the state test? And we talked a couple weeks ago, you said there was some concern about where that was at. So do you still feel that way? And can you explain that a little bit? Because I think it's important for the rest of the board to understand.
When I first came here, learning about the assessments, Illuminate is our big benchmark assessment. We do one at the very beginning of the year. It's an ASA lookalike parallel test. We do one at the beginning of the year, one at the end of the year. And then we do our, with Illuminate, we create 2 benchmarks, one in the around end of October, November, trimester 1, and then trimester 2 in the early spring. And those are geared towards our pacing guide on that. And we've looked, and I have reported on that, what the correlations with those benchmark beginning and end, and they're very high to the state test. Then we have those are summative type benchmark assessments, right? The beginning, the end are summative, they're Ames tests, or not Ames. I'm old,
Going
okay?
back.
I've been around a long time. Hey, yeah.
Yeah.
I just said, so those are state test lookalikes, the beginning and the end. Our benchmarks occur, the try 1, the try 2 benchmarks are linked to our curriculum sequence, but they're all filled with state standards. And there's high correlations to those. So I would say, yes, those provide very high. Then we have a different set of tests and those measurements, and those are formative measurements. Those are the Dreambox and Achieve 3000, things that teachers use day to day to day. And in the work that I did last spring, I was trying to ask the question, what's the relationship and the correlation of those to things like the try 1, the try 2 benchmarks and things. And what I found at this point in time, because I haven't done exhaustive look at it, is that they are significantly positively correlated with the outcomes on those standards tests. But the correlations are not in the 0.8, 0.9 level. They're more like the 0.5, 0.6 level. To me, that says, are they positively correlated, and do they give us information that a student is progressing towards the state tests, what's going to be set? The answer is yes. Are they highly, highly correlated? The answer is no, they're moderately correlated, meaning and keep in mind, these are formative measures day to day to day. They're not state lookalike items and tests. So you have error in there. So they're a piece of the puzzle. They're not a substitute, and you wouldn't want them to be. You want them to be formative. You want them to be related to the instruction that just immediately occurs so you can adapt that instruction. Do they provide information that a student is progressing towards doing well on the state test? Yes. Are they strongly correlated? The answer is no, they're moderately correlated. So you need to have multiple measures. In my world, that would say, if I have a positively correlated assessment over here and it's moderately correlated, then I probably need another measure in here and another measure. And if those 3 or 4 measures that I get that are moderately correlated with the sort of 6 month later test, then that's going to provide me with good information. Multiple measures. Multiple measures is the mantra in our assessment. Have multiple measures that all are tending to be positively correlated with the outcome that we're interested in. So that's the answer to that question. So are they positively correlated? The answer is yes. Are they highly correlated? The answer is no. I think so. They're moderately correlated, which I would expect. I wouldn't expect them to be. I wouldn't expect a formative measure that has 2 standards on it, maybe 5 items or something like that, linked to 2 standards, to be highly correlated with a 40 item, 50 item exhaustive summative test at the end. It just, you wouldn't expect it.
Okay, great. Thank you. Members, any other questions? Clock in the boardroom will show we're adjourned at 5:49. We'll start the next meeting about 15 minutes. Let's just call it 6 o'clock. Governing Board of the Liberty Elementary School District is called to order for our general meeting Monday, August 19th. 4 members are present. Board Member Bixler, Board Member Kenyon, Vice President Parks, myself. Record will show that Board Member Curriculum is out sick. Sorry, Board Member Cirencioni. I got curriculum on my mind. You can call him Board Member Curriculum. I like that. Okay. Next up, after the call to order, will be Pledge of Allegiance. And Board Member Kenyon, can you please lead us?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next on our agenda is item 3.3, approval of the regular agenda.
Mr. President, I make a motion to approve the regular agenda form consistent with policy BEDB and temporarily suspend governing board policy with which this agenda may be inconsistent.
Second?
I have a motion as a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll call for the vote. Vice President Parks,
Aye.
Board Member Kenyon,
Aye.
Board Member Bixler.
Aye.
I'm also an aye. Will show that proof. 4 yes, 0 no. Next item on the agenda will be a governing board update. Starting at the end with Vice President Parks.
I don't have anything at this point.
Yeah, just real quick. It's been an exciting start to the year. Day one, I think every board member just about got to be able to go and greet parents and students and staff back to the campuses. And I know I did over here at Liberty and had a great time, saw a lot of happy faces and a couple sad ones as well, especially the littles, not really used to getting away from mom and dad. But I also saw a couple sad faces of parents, which surprised me. I thought they would be ecstatic. I know my wife and I are kind of a little happy to have a little bit of alone time, but it's just been a great time. From what I've heard and what I've seen going on in the district the last couple of weeks is just, it's been booming. It's been happening. So it's really cool to see what's going on there. I do want to throw a quick shout out to Miss Murray over here, the principal at Liberty. She had her baby, and I know that that's an exciting time. So I just want to congratulate her and her husband on that. So.
Yeah, I've been kind of busy. First of all, I just want to call out Suzanne Wold. For those of you that get the Up the Hill periodical that comes out to the Estrella Mountain folk, great little article in there written by her about the Estrella Mountain Reading Village and how beneficial that is and how powerful that is a tool as far as student learning. Very well written. Article on it, talked about the good things that are happening, also made a request towards more volunteers coming and being a part of this really successful program. So I highly recommend that. Read the article, see what it's about, and then come down to Estrella Mountain and become part of the program. Second thing, opening day at Rainbow Valley. Great opening day is always a lot of fun. Just the amount of energy is just so amazing on the campuses, and Rainbow Valley was no exception. Parents do get in some bad habits when they're dropping off their kids, so you have to work on that to begin with. And just like the kids, they've developed some habits over the summer. They're not necessarily applicable to a classroom, so you have to teach those habits. But it looked real smooth within an hour of the first drop-off. Everybody was in school, everybody was in class, and everybody was learning and teaching. So it was great opening day. And then finally, on that opening day, I also got to go over to Las Brisas Academy, where they got a school supply donation by the, I believe it's Kihi Distributors. And this is not the first year they've done that. They come by and they drop off school supplies. They're donated to the school. And wow, what a great moment that was. And to see the excitement on the distributor people, and they're dropping off the supplies with the knowledge of what that's going to do for the kids. So thank you very much for that donation, and great start to school.
Again, I'd like to welcome everybody back to school. It's started off very well. We've had a few issues with parking and drop-off, and our local police departments have been very supportive to our principals. So I'd like to thank both Buckeye PD, MCSO, and Goodyear for that. We enjoyed the first day of school. I went over to West Star and got to hang out for a little bit with Mayor Joe Pizzillo from Goodyear. And Mayor Pizzillo has just been a great supporter of education. It's been great, Dr. Monroe, since you came to the district, to forge that relationship with the city of Goodyear and Buckeye as well. Mayor Osborne from Buckeye is always great to come out as well. So a great time after we were done there. Headed over to Rainbow Valley, and again, some nice positive things happening there. In the first week, I was able to make it to all 7 schools and stop by to say hi. Dr. Mahorn and I drove around one day. I felt like I was driving Miss Daisy. She laughed at me the whole time I said that, but she just got in the car and rode along. It was great. Saw everybody, and just really excited this year to see things. Teachers came out and said how excited they were for the year. So it's positive when in the first week of school, that's that kind of crazy week. And people come up and say how excited they were for the school to be started is a great feeling. With that, I want to take a minute here to welcome back Officer Kinsel. Well, he stepped out. There he is back there, back from a little trip to the surgeon, I believe, and I think the honey-do list got too long, and he had a choice of come work or work harder. So thank you for coming. And Officer Justin Ricks covered for him while he was out, so we'll miss him. He didn't take our jokes near as well as you do, so you could pass that on to him. But no, he's a great guy as well. So we're in good hands. We appreciate you guys being here. On a little bit of a sad note, Blue Horizons had a counselor, Miss Shana Kozak, and she recently passed away. I went with Dr. Horn on Thursday to notify the staff of that. I would just like to take a moment of silence to recognize her and her family. She really, really touched the lives of a lot of students and staff in the 1 year she was at Blue Horizons. In my career, I've made quite a few notifications to people. That was probably the most unpleasant one I've ever been a part of, because the staff was really touched by what she did. So her husband, her son are surviving this as best they can, but just if we could take a moment of silence, I'd appreciate it. Thank you. And the last thing I'd just like to do is we brought some crisis counselors for this. They're from our district, and our regular counselors, but in this role, they're kind of forming a little bit different role with the crisis. But 4 of them came up. We requested 4 to come to the school today. Marcy McBride, Lori Toole, Don Carrasquillo, and Danielle, and you're going to have to help me. Kolodze, Kolodziej. That's why I can't say that one very well, but Kolodze. So I practiced it all day. I apologize to her, but we really appreciate what they were doing today. Vice President Parks and I sponsored a little pizza lunch for them and took up pizza to thank them for what they were doing a little bit extra, and the appreciation from them was amazing. They worked with Shana, and they knew her from previous districts. The words they shared with her are just amazing. So it'll be a big miss for her. It'll be a big loss to our district, and the next person has big shoes to fill, that's for sure. So with that, we'll move on to item 5.1, superintendent update.
President Todd, Vice President Parks, members of the board, as you've mentioned, we've had a very positive overall beginning of the school year. We mourn with Blue Horizon. Our thoughts and prayers are with the family, with the community there. Notwithstanding that, all of the things considered have been very positive around Liberty. We had a successful Meet the Teacher open house. We've been able to keep our buildings cool, and I'm knocking on wood as I say that. And we've welcomed our students back into our classroom. By now, most kinks, if not all, have been worked out in some of our transportation routes. So we've been able to shorten the ride times as much as reasonably possible in our district. Assessments of learning for students has already taken place, and I'm proud to say that instruction kicked off on day 1 with students in desks learning with their peers across all 7 schools. Not day 3, not day 4, not day 5, but day 1. I'm very proud of that focus. I'm also happy to remind the board that we started the first day of school with our certified vacancies filled. As the board knows, that's a celebration. This is an upgrade and an improvement over the past few years. Keeping an effective teacher in front of our students is critical. I appreciate the board's actions and helping the staff be able to do that this school year. The board's action that supported our HR department and our principals. Regarding student enrollment, we ended last year in May with 4,575 students. With the 10-day drop being tomorrow, I anticipate, Court Monroe, that our enrollment on Wednesday will be about 4,600. Now, that's an increase, and let me tell you why this is very, very good. If you remember last year, we promoted a very large group of 8th graders, and we enrolled a very small group of kinders. So we dropped 100, 150 kids at the very beginning of the year. So this year, it appears that we've been able to overcome that difference, which is a sign of growth. And per usual, we'll continue to grow steadily throughout the year. I am very anxious to see how Labor Day goes as school starts around Labor Day in many areas of the country, and many families relocate to areas before Labor Day. So these are very optimistic and positive numbers about our enrollment. And I want to remind the board, the fuel that drives the budget is student enrollment. We want student enrollment. We want kids in our classrooms. We don't want overcrowded classrooms, but I know that Dr. Mahorn, our principals, have done a good job of keeping our class sizes within ranges that our board approved. Currently, our highest enrolled schools are Blue Horizon, West Star, and Las Brisas, with our lowest enrolled school being Liberty. The schools with the best attendance the first 2 weeks of school have been West Star, Estrella, and Las Brisas. We'll continue to update the board on both student enrollment and attendance as the year goes on as we do. Lastly, I would like to thank the teachers, our leaders, the staff, our parents, and you, the governing board members, for all your support and working together for a very smooth start for the school year to take off. The sky is truly the limit this year. We're tackling hard challenges. There's a lot of change happening. There'll be a lot of positive change happening into the future as well. But I'm proud to say that we're working in a way that's focused and intentional on behalf of the students until the last day of school in May, and then we'll bring on the next year. So, President Todd, that's my report.
Thank you. Appreciate it. It's always great to hear good things happening. All right, next will be item 6.1, approval of the consent agenda.
Can I pull 6.3?
6.3, anything else? All right, hearing none, I'll take a motion.
Mr. President, I make a motion to approve personnel items with the exception of 6.3.
Point of order. We're talking about the consent agenda, right?
Yes.
So it would be approval of the consent agenda.
I apologize. I clicked on 6.3 and I read the wrong one. Thank you. Mr. President, I make a motion to approve the consent agenda minus 6.3.
Okay, we have a
Second.
motion to approve item 6.1, the consent agenda with the exception of 6.3.
Correct.
Bixler, you did a second, correct?
Correct.
Okay. No discussion, we'll call for the vote. Vice President Parks.
Aye.
Board Member Kenyon.
Aye.
Board Member Bixler.
Aye.
I'm also an aye. We'll show that proof 4 yes, 0 no. We'll move to 6.3. Vice President Parks.
Thank you, Mr. President. Under the supplemental compensation, there's a line item for Azalea gifted testing support, amounts $5,000. It says it's a substitute. My question here is a little more defined. Is this extra above what we pay the substitute, or why is it $5,000? What's our hourly rate? Why? I'm confused as why there's a line item for this.
Sure. So those are current substitutes, Mr. Parks. This person is a current substitute. The daily rate is $150. It is in here because it does come out of the Ed Services M&O budget, not to exceed $5,000.
Thank you. That was my question. We're trying to keep a real tight cap on expenditures, and we're always looking at where money's going, and that one just kind of stuck out to me because I saw in the last meeting there was 3 more, so there's a total of 20,000. So you just created a cap on the expenditure for those services.
Just for the Azella and the gifted testing, correct. So they are still substitutes if they are not helping us with testing.
Perfect. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Are the teachers that are doing this gifted testing, are they gifted certified?
The teachers that are testing,
Right, that are providing the testing?
they are not
Yeah,
gifted
they're not.
certified.
Should they be?
They do not have to be.
That was not exactly the question, but should they be? I mean, I'm asking of the board, do you want gifted teachers doing gifted testing, or do you?
My question is, what does the testing involve? I don't believe an expertise level is required to do the testing, so I would say no, I don't think they need to be.
It is not. It is administering an assessment online.
Okay.
So it's more like a proctor.
They are a
Proctor needs
testing
it.
proctor.
So they're not having to, do they grade the test and stuff?
They do
No?
not.
Okay.
The online assessment is graded online
Okay.
through Riverside Data Management.
Okay. All right. No other discussion. I'll take a motion.
Motion to approve item 6.3.
Motion, I have a second.
I'll second.
A motion, a second for item 6.3. There's no further discussion. We'll take your vote, Vice President Parks.
Aye.
Board Member Kenyon.
Aye.
Board Member Bixler.
Aye.
I'm also, I will show that proof 4 yes, 0 no. Move to item 7.1, discussion and consideration to approve guaranteed maximum price, otherwise known as the GMP, amendment to the AIA Construction Manager at Risk contract with Core Construction for construction of the Loretta Zumbro Elementary School. Mr. Young is absent tonight. We wish him well. He's not feeling well. Dr. Monroe, I guess it'll be you.
Yeah, President Todd, Vice President Parks, and members of the board. I'm not Bob Young, but I'll do my best. This is an exciting agenda item to bring to you tonight. I want to paint a little background. While I have Whitney and Jason, I invite them up to the microphone to be at the podium. They're from CORE. But as you can see in the executive summary, on January 9th, we issued the RFQ seeking a request for qualifications for services of construction manager at risk for Loretta Zumbro Elementary School. In February, the governing board approved the award of the contract to Core Construction. After execution of the CMAR contracts, the project team, Mr. Young, myself, DLR, Core Construction, district staff, we've been working to arrive at a guaranteed maximum price for the construction of Loretta Zumbro Elementary School. I'm very grateful for DLR and Core. There's been a lot of meetings, many that I haven't even been in and many that I have been in, with a lot of value engineering and really trying to get the most bang for our buck and utilizing taxpayer dollars responsibly. The GMP as presented tonight will be $28,671,479 that we're asking for the board approval on. Let me just mention a few things. I'm very appreciative of this board for their involvement, for their hard questions. We've had multiple meetings on Loretta Zumbro Elementary School, and there'll continue to be meetings and involvement from communities and planning principal and those kind of things. We're currently planning a phased opening in August, meaning our timeline is tight, but we can open likely 3 buildings out of the 5 or 6 so that we can welcome kids and families while construction continues. And our newest hurdle, because this project has a lot of hurdles, is working with the city of Goodyear, and I'm working with the city manager and their team on the annexation process. It's a county property, and we're working with Goodyear to expedite that annexation process into the city of Goodyear. Which they're very interested in, and we found that they're a very good partner to work with. So I'll likely be speaking to the town council here in the next few weeks to ask for their push so that we can open in August. And we found that they've been good partners. I'd also like to remind the board that when all is said and done, the school, it's almost like a phase 1. There's like a gym that hasn't been built, and there's other parts of the school that haven't been built. So it could be likely, as that school fills up, that a bond could go onto the ballot to ask our voters to support more of the build. So this GMP as presented is mostly money from the school facilities board, and then on the next agenda item, the board will be asked to pass the resolution, which we commit to you the dollars that make up the balance of the construction project. However, I've asked Core to kind of be at the microphone to just highlight a few of the questions that the board has brought up regarding extra parking, regarding restrooms, kind of the design, and then to ask any questions that the board might have about the GMP when all is said and done. So, Jason and Whitney.
Thank you. President Todd, distinguished members of the board. Appreciate you guys having me up here again representing the design and construction team. My name is Jason Santor with Core Construction. Had the privilege of speaking in front of you guys a few weeks ago to give an update on the project. And as Dr. Monroe mentioned, we're just really excited tonight to provide the information on our guaranteed maximum price. We feel there's been a lot of work, a lot of questions asked, a lot of, I'll say, healthy tension to make sure we get to where we're at. So we do know that there was a few questions that were asked related to fire doors, related to student restrooms, and related to additional parking adjacent to the gym. So I'll address each one of those and then open for any additional questions you guys may have. So the first one related to fire doors, we do not have any fire rated doors on the project. We do have 5 individual buildings on this project, and the maximum distances required for exiting per the 2018 IBC International Building Code that we're following, that Goodyear has adopted for this project, we're well within those maximum distances. Therefore, we don't need those fire rated doors for this project. As we kind of move on to the question related to student restrooms, we do have a more traditional approach to our student restrooms, with the exception of there's no doors to the restrooms, which opens for a passive supervision. You can't see into the restrooms as you're supervising. However, you could hear some of the conversations that are happening in there to understand what's going on. And then directly adjacent to those restrooms are individual restrooms as well for the students. And then the last question related to parking associated to adjacent to the gym. There is a plan as part of the master plan, as Dr. Monroe mentioned, the ability to add 51 additional parking spots in the bus loop, the center of the bus loop, just to the northeast of the gym. This would be within about 200 feet to the actual gym and less than 200 feet, about 150 feet to the front entrance of that building. So that could be used after hours for events that may be using the gym, or eventually teacher parking if that's a desire of the school. So we understand those were a few questions that were brought up by the board. So I hope that provides you the answer and clarity that you need. But if you have any additional questions.
Yeah, thank you, Jason. I just want to comment before the board asks any questions. We were very blessed to have Bob Young on our staff. Don't let Bob fool you. He can be a bulldog. Just ask David and Whitney and Jason when it comes to these things. Nicest guy in the world, but he's really driven this project very, very well. And I know he's very sad that he couldn't come tonight to kind of see it through the GMP, but there's been a lot of, I think healthy tension is a good word. Really hard questions asked because we want to do what's best, as does Core and DLR, and we owe it to our taxpayers. So it's very exciting, and the administrative motion would be, we would recommend the approval of the GMP, but I know we're here for any questions that you might have.
Members, any questions?
I have more than a comment just to make it clear. One of the early things that we discussed in one of our study sessions was the bathroom issue. I just want to make it clear to everybody that for student safety and students that didn't fit in a general restroom environment, that we made, the option for them to have their own restrooms. So I think we kind of went over and above on that, and we are always looking out for the safety of our children. So I just wanted to thank you guys.
I would agree. Safety is always a critical component. And I just want to clarify for some folks. You heard that we're building this to the 2018 International Building Code. It's now 2024. That code does not come out every year. That's the most recent. That's what the city has adopted. So do not be feared that we're building off of old standard. We're building off of the most current standard with that. So and you guys can set me straight, but I'm pretty familiar with that wonderful code. So that's why that's there. But I remember years ago, first time I heard we were building on a code that was 6 years old. Seemed a little strange. Yeah, I agree with everything. I just had one question with the restrooms, and I was hoping Ms. Schaefer was still going to be around as well, but I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. Mr. Naminsky, you guys have the open bathroom, kind of the open doors too. Are those working well for you, or do you think we should do something different? Actually, can you come up for the record so we... Yeah. You should have left with the rest of them and you wouldn't be on the spot. She'll buy you lunch tomorrow, though.
Okay, that's okay. We went to a switch last year, I would say probably in February or March, where, especially in the middle school, we had those bathroom doors that were open. There's still full privacy. When you go past, you can't see. But just in terms of if you're looking for an answer regarding student behavior, student safety, what's taking place in that bathroom, it's worked very well. We were also strategic this year about placing certain admin near bathrooms, and that has helped. But we've had no issues with the door being open. No student issues, no parent issues. It's gone, I would say, reasonably well. I would say, although we haven't tracked it, we've seen a downtick on behavioral issues in the bathroom. If that's the
Great. Okay. Perfect. Thank you. All right, members, if there's any questions, discussion, we can have those out. Otherwise, we'll take a motion.
Mr. President, I make a motion to approve the guaranteed maximum price amendment to the AIA Construction Manager at Risk contract with Core Construction for construction of elementary school number 8 and authorize the superintendent or executive director of operations to execute the guaranteed maximum price amendment and any related documents necessary to carry out the guaranteed maximum price amendment or construction contracts.
I'll second.
I have a motion, a second. If there's no further discussion, we'll take the vote. Vice President Parks.
Aye.
Board Member Kenyon.
Aye.
Board Member Bixler.
Aye.
I'm also an aye. We'll show that proof 4 yes, 0 no. Next will be item 7.2, discussion and consideration to approve the resolution to use local funds for construction of the Loretta Zumbro Elementary School. Mr. Young is still not here, so we're going to turn it back over to you, Dr. Monroe.
President Todd, Vice President Parks, members of the board. This is a requirement for the school facilities board, as the board has been aware before this meeting, and even on the comments here, we basically have to have the board approve a resolution for how are we going to pay for the balance of any funds needed on this project. So you can see in item 2, the amount, there'll be bond monies from this last bond money that we will use. So we appreciate our voters helping to support the construction of the new school. 529, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Bolden, that has to do with our food nutrition, our child nutrition department. We'll be paying a little more than $1 million to help outfit the kitchen because of what our food services is able to do at our current 7 schools. So we appreciate Cindy and her crew. That's what that 529 is. Funds out of some of our adjacent ways that will be used, and then our maintenance and operations. So this is a requirement that we turn this into the school facilities board. And so we would, administration would recommend the board approve this resolution to use local funds for construction of LZES. We got to get used to saying LZES or whatever we call it.
Something. Members, any questions?
Yeah, I have just a quick question. So looking at number 1 up there, we have the 23 million, there you go, 23,151,000 for the new school, of which 18, roughly and a half, right, may be used for hard construction costs. Looking at the rest, how much, what that leaves there is 4,630,000 roughly. So what is that? Is that what we're looking at?
Jason, you want to come up and help interpret those numbers a little bit? I could see where they're a little confusing.
Yeah, so the $23 million is what the SFB is funding for this project, and then the balance of that 18 million is the 20%. So it's split 80 to 20, where you're able to utilize 80% for construction costs, 20% for project costs that fall outside of our GMP that are part of the overall project budget.
Okay, so above and beyond.
Yep.
Thank you.
Any additional questions? Hearing none, I'll take the motion.
Motion to approve the resolution to use local funds for construction of the Loretta Zumbro Elementary School.
Second.
Second.
All right, we have the motion, the second for item 7.2. There's no further discussion. I'll call the vote. Vice President Parks.
Aye.
Board Member Kenyon.
Aye.
Board Member Bixler.
Aye.
I'm also an aye. We'll show that proof 4 yes, 0 no. Next will be a second read, item 7.3, second read and approval of policies IGA and IGD.
Mr. President, I have public comment.
Okay.
Mr. Elwood Ketzner.
President Todd, Vice President Parks, board members, and Superintendent Dr. Monroe. I have some extremely pleasing news tonight. After the last board meeting, we've had some really good things that happened. The Goldwater Institute awarded Liberty 25 board an award. It's actually saying that you're going back to traditional schooling and getting rid of a lot of junk that was in the criterias and the boards, and that was extremely good to read. Also, Legislative District 23 and Legislative District 25 in Buckeye had some board members speak at both events, and they are extremely pleased with the direction of the board. And I so noted that on all of some social websites. The ECRC Club was the same. And to your validation, the Supreme Court of the United States shot down Title 12 or Title 11 changes. And thank God that this board saw that in the future and was able to go ahead and just shut that down. So very good news. This is a great place to be. We have a slate of candidates coming up. We'll be posting golden tickets on the candidates running for this board. And we urge and will urge, with the support of everyone that I just mentioned, okay, that this board continue to do what you've done, which is great. Thank you so much, and God bless you all.
Are there any more comments?
On the,
No more public
More
comment.
public comments? Okay. All right, 7.3, Dr. Monroe.
Yeah, President Todd, Vice President Parks, this is a second read and a potential approval by the board tonight for a vote. The first read was brought at the last board meeting when we reviewed IGA and IGD revisions, which have been reviewed by legal. In summary, IGA includes more clarity laid out when curriculum is studied and developed to be proposed for adoption. There's been language added to emphasize roles of teachers and emphasize roles of parents as well as procedures for piloting materials prior to consideration and approval. And IGD lays out more areas that I went over in the last meeting that are topics of prohibited instruction that can be illustrated in our policy. So administration would recommend approval of policies IJA and IGD.
Okay, if there's comments, Board Member Bixler, did you have a comment?
yeah, Mr. President, I cannot accept the policy revision as it stands. I have some suggestions as far as changes, and it all deals with IGD. Subtopic A, when we're talking about the text below, looks like we added it. Subtopic A talks about critical race theory. We don't teach that. We teach the state standards. We don't teach critical race theory. Critical race theory, as is even written in this document, is a philosophical discussion at the university level. We don't teach it. So this subtopic A is unnecessary. I suggest we just take it out altogether. However, if you want a statement about a curriculum, then I suggest we use the words are not based in the state of Arizona standards. In other words, we don't teach anything that's not in the state standards. Subtopic C, I would remove all of the text after we do not teach racism. I agree with that. But you don't need the rest without limit to theories that promote concepts, blah, blah, blah. It's unneeded. Just say it. We're not going to teach racism. Subtopic D is the same as A. We don't teach victimhood mentality. It's not part of the state standards. It doesn't belong there. So take that out altogether. I also find that the additional text that's in there is highly political. This is a nonpartisan position. This, to me, just speaks of politics. I think is incorrect and ought to be corrected. And these are the changes I recommend. I think we should take a look at these changes, table this for right now, and come back and decide whether or not we want to go with these changes.
Mr. President, can I have the floor?
You may.
There's a little irony here, I believe. I don't understand the protest if this isn't in curriculum. We're making a statement that it isn't and it won't be. We're looking down the road. We're making sure it doesn't end up in the school. And I also would like to see an evaluation done on our current curriculum to make sure it's not in there. That being said, is this political? You betcha it is. And I'm going to come at it from a little different perspective. 30 years they've been putting this destructive political ideology in our schools. We're taking it out. So that's my comment on it, and we're not going to I'm not going to change this.
Mr. President, can I have the floor?
Okay.
I completely agree with what Vice President Park said. This is future-proofing our district, making sure that we stick to educating our children, and not becoming the parents, leaving the parenting to the parents, and making sure that we stick to what we ought to stick to is our curriculum, and making sure that our proficiency rates, as we talked about prior to this meeting, the board, or the growth and proficiency rates, focusing on that, on ELA, on math, on science, and not allowing any of this stuff to come in play. We've seen so much happen over the last 5 years, even since COVID, where all of a sudden things just jump into, somebody gets some idea and they want to create a curriculum about it. This is future-proofing our district, making sure that we stick to the fundamentals of education. So I'm for this change.
Thank you. I too will agree with Vice President Parks, Board Member Kenyon. I support this change. Policy is often developed long ahead of the time that it's needed. This is doing exactly that. I do believe that we are not teaching at this point these topics. I want to make sure it remains that way. We've heard loud and clear from a large constituent base in this district. I'm not speaking of a silent majority. I'm speaking of a large constituent base who have overwhelmingly given feedback that this is the direction they want to see our school district headed. Our job is to represent those folks, and I do support this. So with that, I'll take a motion.
Mr. President, motion to approve policy IGA, IGD.
A second, please.
I will second that.
We have a motion to approve IGA and IGD. No further discussion. We'll call for the vote.
Aye.
Vice President Parks,
Aye.
Board Member Kenyon,
Aye.
Board Member Bixler.
Nay, and I'd like to make a comment at the end.
You may. I'm also a yes. We will show the approved 3 yes, 1 no. Mr. Bixler, we'll give you 1 minute for your comment.
Yeah, Ms. Bixler says that it's not a vote against the first of the policies, just IGD.
Okay, thank you. All right, we'll move to item 7.4. Discussion, consideration of first reading policy. Get ready.
Yeah.
BBBA, BEDB, BGE, CFD, DJE, EBAA, EBC, ECD, EEAA, GCF, GDF, IHA, IMA, IGNDB, JFA, BDA. That's 1, JFA BDA, JFB, JH, JHD, JIH, JJE, KB, and KEC. Dr. Monroe, if you could repeat those off of memory and give us an update.
Well done, well done. President Todd and Vice President Parks, this is a first read of these policies, so there is no approval tonight. We bring all of these policies to you tonight as a first read to answer any questions, to take back and study before we come back at the next board meeting for a second read. When legislative sessions occur and statutes change, policies are then adjusted. So some of these are almost semantics. Some of these policies revision some of them are a little more in depth. Related to statute, perhaps. All have been legally approved by our legal. Also, some of them are from the ASBA Policy Advisory. Our executive cabinet members have basically been assigned to a handful of these to kind of study and become experts at if the board has questions or if we need to do some research and bring it back to the board. But you'll see a clean copy attached with the revision, and then you'll see a copy that actually brings the revision out. I think it's red, Minnie, right? It's red where you can see what the change and adjustment is. So again, this is a first read, but if it's not assigned to me, we can ask Dane or Natasha or Stephanie to answer any questions the board may have. Again, some of them are just aligning with statute, and then some are maybe a little more in depth. But this is one of the very important roles of the board. A lot of people don't know what board members do. They hire the superintendent, supervise the superintendent, approve curriculum, set the vision of the district, but people underestimate the board sets and revises policy. And so these are always very important votes that a school board does. And so, President Todd, we're here to answer any questions or have these as a first read.
Members, any questions?
I got more of a comment. As we start to build out our strategic plan, one of the key components is parental involvement and doing whatever the district can to bring in participation. And the changes in KB are, we're being very proactive with that to say we're going to go above and beyond to get parents involved with every aspect of what goes on in the school district. So I really like the change here. Thank you.
I have a number of questions.
Sure.
Can we go to policy CFD? Yeah, if you scroll down to membership, yeah, it appears that I don't understand why they're taking away the weighting of the membership. So no longer 3 parents, no longer 3 teachers, just parents, teachers.
Yes.
Why? Was there a reason for that?
Yeah, my understanding is statute does not put a number on there, and that the Arizona School Boards Association had associated a number there. But as I read it, I don't think the statute says 3 teachers, 1 non-certificated employee. And so I think that's why it was pulled back to align better with
The
the
statute is not
statute.
consistent with what the policy was saying.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, because I was wondering if it was trying to lessen the impact of, say, parents on that committee, and I thought that was a really bad idea.
I just think ASBA needs to pay a lot more attention to statute, and now there's a lot of pressure for them to do that. And so, like I said, my understanding is that number 33111, those weren't in statute, and so they're just aligning it with the current ARS.
Okay, yeah.
So in theory on that, with D, we could have more than 1 if we wanted to.
It's, yeah,
Because they're not defined. Before it was defined as,
yes, that's correct.
all right, perfect.
All right, I also have a question on policy DJE, and I can't find it quickly enough here.
DJ, I think that's a Dane. I think that's Dane.
Don't see it either on here.
Yeah, go to the red line
You're
if
right
you
there.
would.
Minnie, I think you're there. Or... Yes. Go ahead. What was your question, Member Bixler?
Well, I just didn't quite understand. Is the only change that date change?
No, I think you have to scroll
And
down
then
to the
removal
bottom.
of that. Well,
No, we're just making one change. You can scroll up.
Oh, did
yeah,
we
scroll
miss
up
it?
a little bit. Yeah, there's a bunch.
Just crossing that
removed.
out, yeah. So essentially, right now, our policy for any construction or maintenance expenditures we're making anything over 5,000, we're requiring them to get 4 quotes from 4 different vendors. So that's kind of hindering Bob a lot. And, you know, it's basically, we don't need to do that. So the USFR says that we only have to get 3 quotes for expenditures over $10,000. So we're just crossing that out. We basically have it more restricted to what we need to have it.
With the
So we're not really putting a number on the number of quotes we need to get at all.
We still
right?
we need to get
That-
3 quotes for anything over $10,000.
Right, but anything under,
Anything under, yeah,
we
we
could just take 1 quote.
yes.
Yeah, you know, 10 years ago, this may have been a valid number, but with the price of goods and services now, it makes us ineffective.
Okay. Yeah, I was just wondering about that, why that was taken out. How about ECB? They're kind of hard to find, aren't they?
Okay.
Now, my
ECB.
question on that is, yes, and I agree that this seems like a good idea to have this, but do we have a job description?
For a maintenance supervisor?
Yeah.
Yes.
We do have one?
Yeah, we
Okay.
currently have someone in that position as well.
Okay, yeah, I just want to make sure we had that as well, so. EBA, no, I'm sorry, EEAA. And essentially, it extends the amount of distance as far as our responsibility for transportation. Is that correct? Going from 20 to 30?
Yeah, let me just search. Do you if you know that, Dane, go ahead. I just want to make sure I have a good answer here.
Yes, it looks like we're taking out 20 miles and adding it to 30.
Right. Do we know how many students that impacts? How many more students are we going to be transporting?
That's a
Yeah,
Bob question for sure.
I'm sorry, we don't know that. I don't know that, but I will say I'm looking at the description, and this language aligns to the new statute language of ARS 15816.
Is there any chance
Limited
we're going
to
to get
30
some
miles.
additional funding for transportation because of the additional distance?
I will have to get back to you on that and find out for sure. But we can
Be
take
nice
those
if we did.
questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, obviously.
We would get increased mileage, I
Yeah.
believe. So that's what you would get. Our mileage could go up, so we'd get that.
How about policy IHA?
I think that's Natasha.
Knew I'd get to you sooner or later. All right, so it talks about changes in the instructional program and so on. Are we going to see a change in our state testing to match this additional stuff that's going on here?
I don't have an answer for that. Currently, our state assessment does assess English language arts and mathematics, as well as science, which I believe is, if you keep scrolling.
Right, it's the social studies I'm looking at, yeah.
I have not heard word of that yet.
So we don't know if we're going to pick up an additional state test in social studies. I think we should. All right.
I will say part of AHA was that number 2 up there, and Natasha can comment on that, was kind of an increased instruction amount on the Holocaust and other genocides. So it kind of delineates now in statute, right? And Natasha,
Right.
how much time?
Yes, that is accurate.
And the same with Sandra Day O'Connor Day and all that. It's unfortunately, they don't give us any resources to actually celebrate that day. So
ADE does provide resources.
Good,
and then
good.
we share that with our staff.
cool. That's good. Let's go to JH.
Hold on, I have a question.
Oh.
On IHA. Under F, it says including mental health instruction. What are the qualifications for that?
Where are you? Vice President Parks?
IHA. I know there's a statute behind it, but I have a concern. We have phys ed teachers teaching mental health. I'm not okay with that.
Yeah, we would have to dig into that to bring you back an answer and look at that statute, ARS 15701.
Yeah, if you do that and figure out what the qualification requirement should be for that, because I'm not comfortable with that at all.
Will do.
Next one, Ms. Bixler.
JH. I didn't see a red line. I'm wondering if that's just simply a change in format fit. I see things out, but I don't see anything added. So there's nothing added to this one and the next one.
JH, this is Dr. Mohorn, right?
Yep, it is.
Or is the mental or behavioral health, is that added? The underlined.
Add and then the adoption date as well.
So so I was looking for the red line. I didn't see a red line. So that's just because it wasn't made red, right?
It should be read, but I'm reading here, the definition of an excused student absence was expanded
Yeah.
under statute.
Right, yeah.
So, but yeah, that should have been read.
Just a.
Yeah, and the same question on JUD. I think the same thing happened, just wasn't redlined. It's
JHD?
JUD. I think it's JUD, isn't it? JHD.
Oh.
Can't read my own handwriting. JHD.
Yes, that is correct. It's the expanded definition of an excused absence in statute.
Yeah, I just want to make sure I understood what was going on. That's all the questions I had.
Mr. President,
Yes.
if I may.
May.
It's kind of funny. Mr. Parks had the same comment I had on KB with parent involvement. I saw that and I was just very, very happy to see that we're focusing on getting parents more involved in the education of their children, being involved in our school activities, trying to pull them, if you will, in and get a little more involved. So that was good to see that. I did have a question. My only question really that wasn't already answered is GCF. GCF is the professional staff hiring. And when we go down to the bottom, right there, that
Did you say GCF?
GCF, yes.
GCF, all right.
So just kind of, I was just curious why that's left open at this point. Is that something that it was intended to be brought to the board, or is that something you guys were gonna, the administration was gonna talk about and get back?
It's left open, was the ASBA recommendation was left open. That's why I left it open.
Okay.
However, I would imagine that, and maybe I can cue you up, Aaron, that we'd probably need to look at what the board would recommend. A professional candidate's acceptance of a contract offer must be indicated how many days from the date of the written contract or the offer is revoked.
So usual, well, because I think we do.
Yeah, by statute, as you know, certain contracts have statutorily specified amount of days. I think it's left open in this case because the board can decide, how many days they want to leave open an offer of employment. So it's discretionary.
So is ours 21 days? Is that what you're?
I believe it's 21 days.
Should we
for
just amend that to add the 21 days and?
Well, we may need to bring that back. Is it 21 days though? When a teacher,
I'm almost positive.
yeah, I want to make sure that we're not misspeaking, but in a second read, we can research and bring that back specifically. So we have a lot of confidence in what that is.
Thank you. That was my question.
Okay. Let's study that, staff, and let's bring it back for the second read, Stephanie, with a good number that we can support and that the board would have confidence in.
Anything else? All right, we'll move to 7.5, discussion and consideration to approve increase of homebound teacher pay. Ms. Hamrick.
Good evening, President Todd, Vice President Parks, and Governing Board. Sorry, I'm a little bit under the weather. I'm here tonight to actually ask for approval of the homebound salary. It's hourly. It's 20 hours, $20 an hour now, to move it up to $30 an hour. And homebound teachers, we don't have very many students, but when we do, they are students that cancer, brain tumors, car accidents where they cannot come to school, and then the teacher goes out about 4 to 5 hours a week to provide them with general ed services and or special ed services. And so I'm asking the board approval because in the past we haven't been able to get a teacher to do that at $20 an hour because that definitely isn't an hourly, that isn't their average salary. So that's what I'm asking for approval tonight. Any questions?
Just, I didn't see it in the executive summary. Where's the funding coming for this?
It comes out of M&O.
Do we have that budget?
Yes. How many students do we currently have that are considered homebound, Kay?
We have one, possibly two, and it's not for the whole entire year. It's until they get themselves to that point where they can come back to school.
Typically, that's what I've seen in districts I've been in. It's very few amount of kids because they've had an accident or they have an illness and they get homebound instruction for a month or two and then they're back in the classroom. So in a smaller district, it's going to be a very minimal effect to the M&O budget, and we can pay for that.
And it is a state mandate too that we do that for kids.
Perfect. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Miss Hamrick, I apologize. Almost let you sit down. My only question is, where do these teachers come from, and is this going to take them out of a classroom?
No, they actually do it after. It's mandated by state that they can only do the instruction after the school hours or then for our teachers on Fridays when they don't have. So no, they aren't. And a lot of districts, bigger districts, they'll have someone on staff to do that. Our district doesn't, we don't have that amount of students to be able to ask for, request someone on staff. So it's usually, I try to get the student, the teacher that they have, or a teacher in that grade level so that they'll be right there with their grade level standards.
Thank you.
Member Kenyon, back in the 90s, I was a homebound teacher, and it was usually after school once a week for a couple hours. I'd go over at like 5 o'clock. For about a month until that student was able to get back to school.
And the teachers can do it virtually now too. So that's just a discussion that they have with the parents. If a child has a weak immune system, then the teacher will most likely do it virtually because they don't want to give the child germs or what have you. Any other questions before I sit down?
All right, hearing none, I'll take a motion.
Mr. President, I move that we increase the homebound teacher pay from $20 an hour to $30 an hour.
Have a second.
I'll second it.
If there's no discussion, we'll go for the vote. Vice President Parks.
Aye.
Board Member Kenyon.
Aye.
Board Member Bixler.
Aye.
I'm also, I would show that proof. 4 yes, 0 no. Next, boy, we never heard this name and now we hear it all the time. 7.6 Kazimaier Liability Resolution. Mr. Bolden.
President Todd, Vice President Parks, members of the board. This is a follow-up from our last board meeting regarding our favorite topic, the Kazimaier lawsuit. We did receive an email from the county regarding our final liability amount. It did increase from $960,000 to $1,066,000, so it increased by about $100,000. However, the state's going to pay for $570,000 of that, leaving our remaining liability to just shy of $500,000, about $495,000. Fortunately, we have enough dead cash left over from fiscal year 23 to pay for the entire liability. Dead cash is the difference between our ending cash balance and the budget balance carry forward. Typically, we have no use for dead cash as it rolls over from one year to the next. So if we use dead cash to pay for this liability, we will not have to increase our tax rate, and we'll also save under 8% interest in fiscal year 25. And we also won't have to ever say the word Kazimaier again. It's my recommendation that the board approves the usage of dead cash to pay for the Kazimaier liability of $495,925. Questions?
The other word we're not going to use is taxes.
Ooh, yeah, I'm with that. I'm with that.
So it still hurts the district. I mean, because that cash can be used forward to the next budgeting year. And, you know, we're still going to be falling short by about the $500,000 mark. So it doesn't go lightly. I appreciate you working on this so we don't have to look at borrowing the money or increasing our tax rate to our constituents. So thank you for your hard work on that.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I agree. It would be a double hit to then turn around and tax our community for this, for a mistake that the state made. I'm still appalled that we're having to make good on a mistake that somebody else made, but thank you for keeping it as painless as possible.
Thanks, Board Member Bixler.
Any additional comments? All right, guys, here's our chance. Let's put this to the history banks. Take a motion in a second.
Mr. President, I make a motion to approve the use of dead cash to pay for the Quagmire liability of $495,925.
Second.
I have a motion, I have a second. No further discussion, I'll take the vote. Vice President Parks.
Aye.
Board Member Kenyon.
Aye.
Board Member Bixler.
Aye.
I'm also, I will show that proof 4 yes, 0 no. Next item is 8.1, public comment, general. topic.
No public comment today.
All right, move to 9.1, board comments or agenda topic requests.
Can we have a review of just kind of an outline of because we made a significant change in our discipline matrix. I would like to see kind of and of course ongoing as the year goes on, kind of a report to the board of if we're seeing any issues or, you know, the good, the bad, and the ugly, so to speak, and if there's any changes we need to make.
Okay, sounds good. Anything else? All right, hearing none, we'll move to 10.1, upcoming board meetings. We've got one on September 16th. That is a board meeting and a work session. October 7th is a regular board meeting. October 28th is a regular board meeting and work study session. Those dates still work for everybody? Hearing no objections, we'll continue the course. We're on to 11.1, adjournment of the meeting. It is now 7:02. We'll show the meeting adjourned.